For now, we want to make a new class. So we'll right click source, new, and we'll do Java class. So I'm just going to check the Discord just in case everybody is following. Uh, well, I should have Twitch open in case it was all watching. Okay, we got 4 people, so we should be good. Let me know if everybody's gotten to this point. I don't want to keep going. Alright, well, it's recorded, so I'll just keep going. So yeah, right click source, hit new class. We're gonna call it main, just a sample name. You can call it whatever you want. Just make sure every time you create a new class, you want to start it as with a capital letter in the beginning of the name. So we could call it main class or main script class, whatever you want to do. Just make sure it's capital. Okay, once we have our new class, we could set it up to use our OSBOT script methods with the API. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have your class open. If it's not open in here, just double click the class file. Go here next to the bracket or the curly brace. You want to type extends script. And make sure under the drop down you want to make sure it's org.osbot.rs07.script. Now here's where we call script library and we extend the whole class to it. Next, it wants you to implement all the methods. I believe only on loop is implemented when you do this. So the shortcut could be Alt key plus Enter, and it'll bring up the menu, or hover over it, and it should be the little thinking icon here, and implement methods. So we're going to click implement methods, and we're going to select on loop because that's all it's asking for right now. So once we have that, it'll get rid of all the errors. So now I'm gonna go ahead and import everything we'll need just for the basic lesson. So the shortcut I like to use is, which I'll put in comments here, is Control plus or O to implement methods into our class. So I want to implement onStart, so I'll do Control plus O, bring up the methods, and we want to select onStart. Set that up. Layout, and this is how I like to lay out my scripts, where you just do the on start and then the on loop and then the on exit. So now we're going to look for on exit, and I don't know if we'll use paint. I guess we can go over paint. Yeah, we'll go over that. So we'll get that there. We'll just rename this to graphics. I don't want to type all that out, so we'll just do G, and we should be good. Yeah. Okay, so I want to explain this in case you didn't see it in the util area for the script skeleton code. Anything that's placed in the on start, anything placed here is run once. So once you start the script, it'll start with the on start, and then it will start loading the loop. So anything you want to run once here, like getting prices or setting stuff, anything, setting variables, whatever you want to do, it would be in the on start. Now the loop is something that always continues while the script is running, unless you pause the script. And the ideal loop time would be 600. I mean, if you want to go full tinfoil anti-band, you can make it random. I usually just keep it, some people do this and think it'll help for some reason. I guess you can just delay the time if you want. If you want a longer loop time, just, do it like that. I usually just keep it 600. And oh yeah, anything placed here, keep looping every 600 milliseconds. 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second. Okay, so And then, okay, so when we have the onExit method, every time the script stops, any code that's placed in here runs once, just like onStart, but this one runs on when the script exits. One starts when the script starts, and the code executed here is on the exit of the script. And then we have our on paint for OSBOT, which will be just anything you want to paint to the OSBOT canvas, which is like your time, your XP per hour, whatever you want to do. And the basics would be where you do G, graphics variable there from the parameter, draw a string, type your string out, and then where the X and Y of where you want to put it on the OSBOT canvas. So here is where it'll paint anywhere in this section of the bot. So we go to settings, mouse position, and here if I want to do 10, it'll be right here, and I just put it down there. And anything I draw there or anything I type inside the string in IntelliJ will be placed right here where my mouse is. 10x and hold on. Yeah, right about here in this section area here. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay, hold on. I'll stop right now and give everybody a break to catch up. Go ahead and add him. Okay, if you first, just started joining the stream, I went over how to set up IntelliJ, which you can follow with the video. Open up a new project structure. Make sure it's 1.8 for the SDK, Java 8 for the language. Make sure you find the OSBOT.jar for the library, and then the artifact, which is where we're just going to put it in the scripts folder. So every time we reload, anytime we reload here, it'll show up under local. I don't have it created yet, but I'll show you how to do that soon. I just want to make sure nobody else is coming in. Let's see, undefeated. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to business. So I'm gonna go ahead and log in. I don't really have to worry about not showing my RSN because it's not really my account, and it's not anybody's account on the forum, so it's nothing to worry about me leaking any information. Okay, let's see, where do we want to start? We're doing NPC interaction, I believe. Yeah, or object or NPC. I'll probably do everything that's with interaction. I'll show you different ways of how you can set it up. Let's see. First, I want to go ahead and get this set up. So anytime you'll see me go up here, every time we add new code and we want to refresh the script. After you've set the path and project structure under artifacts, it should be, make a new jar, name it, put it in your OSBOT scripts folder. Make sure the output is inside the jar. So we have Lesson1 for the main module. Hit OK. And then now we can go up to Build in the navigation bar here. Build Artifacts, which is the jar we made in project structure. And I like to do Rebuild. So it'll just keep recreating it every time we place new code. So it'll say down here when it's finished, compilation completed successfully. Click play and we'll hit refresh. Oh wait, I forgot something. Yeah. But anyway, this jar should show up in your scripts folder. But the one thing I forgot for the script skeleton, which I always forget, because I tried to record a video just like this earlier. You want to add the OSBOT script manifest. So you would do the @ symbol, which is Shift +2. and look for script manifest. Usually when you do the @ sign, it should show up automatically. Make sure it's org.osbot.rs07.script. Select it or hit enter. And we want to do the same thing, shortcut keys, which is Alt plus Enter to implement methods. Same way, we could do Control O for inside to implement any methods available inside the script. Or when there's an error like this, instead of typing it all out, name and stuff like that, etc., we can just do Alt plus Enter, add missing annotation parameters, and then we can type it as we go. You could put your name as the author. I'll go ahead and do mine. Info, that doesn't really matter. And then this is where we put the name of the script. So I'll do it Lesson1. And we have logo. We don't have to worry about that now unless you're uploading to the SDN. The logo string parameter only takes direct links through Imager. So like http i.imgur.com and then whatever image it was. You get the idea. And then the version is, I think it's a double, or it could be an int, whatever you want to do. I just do 1.0 when I first start a new script. I'll just make it version 1 because that's what we start with. Let's see. Okay, just making sure everybody's following. Okay, let me add this here. Just want to get everybody started up. Alt plus enter. So there's two ways to implement methods. Just want to keep that there. And I guess we'll start with the object we'll do we'll do object interaction, I guess. We can do that first. Let's see, where do we want to go? Anybody have any ideas where we want to start? Yeah, someone tweet mod. Don't tweet them yet because I'm still using this account for Brutal Drags. Epic free scripts. I'll try. I mean, I'm not the best teacher. I guess we'll do this. Smelt. Just interacting with this. I don't have any Lovakite ore, but we're already here. I mean, I could go to Lumbridge. Yeah. We'll start somewhere basic with a bunch of NPCs. Yeah, object and NPC interaction with conditional sleeps. Thanks. Thanks for reminding me, man. Let's see. Yeah, let's just go to Lumbridge. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll just do everything. Let's see if I got an axe. Pickaxe. Let's see, what's my thieving level? It should be high enough. Yeah, and we can go to Draenor. I don't know. I'll just do everything. Just show you examples. I mean, just wait for that to start. I'm in world 346 in case you guys want to come over here. Alright, I guess we can kill goblins. Okay, so the goblins have an attack option. That's what we need to keep in mind. Anything in the menu here is what we can interact with. Except for cancel. We can't really do cancel unless you use the menu API, which is this here, where you can select anything in that menu. Here in this menu is what is called the menu API. But what we're really looking for is the interact options, which is attack, walk here, or examine. And the way to get a goblin is calling the NPC class or library, which is listed here. I can't even. Here you want to go to the API docs, go find NPC, and then this is all the actions we can do for each NPC. We can take this, and then we can go here, and we can go to character, where NPC extends character. So we can use anything from the character class on the NPC. Get animation, get combat time, get health percent, is attackable. We can make filters, is attack, under attack, and I believe we can do the interact class. I don't know where that's at. I think it's this. Nah. Okay, anyway. So we'll go back here. We want to get goblins. I'm going to show you different ways. This is the most basic way. Since we don't want it to run once, we don't want to kill one goblin and then stop and just keep it looping and doing nothing. So we want to make sure everything, all our code is in the on loop. So what we'll start with is calling the NPC class, where it's all caps, NPC. Make sure it's org.osbot.rs7.api.model. Select it. And then here we want to give it a name. So we call the class and now we want to give it a name. I'm probably butchering it. You know, I'm not the best, but I can explain it how I could understand it. So let's say we'll kill NPC, or just NPC for short. So this is what we're calling. This is the variable name, or I guess you can call it an object, right? I don't know. I'd have to refresh on my Java. I only know so much for OSBOT. So the object name or class, and then what we want to call it. And then here we want to assign it the methods called get NPC. So we'll call the method from the NPCs class. Want to select it, hit the dot or a period to get to the next part, and we want to do closest. And closest method, it'll grab the closest entity being NPC object or anything like that closest to you. If you want to filter NPCs yourself, you'll use the filter class, or you can just use a lambda filter, which I'll show you later. But first we want to do goblin. So we'll type goblin. Make sure it's case sensitive, unless you filter it and you use two lowercase. But first we're just going to do it like as the basic way. Make sure you type it right. Goblin with a capital G. And then we want to end it with a semicolon. Okay, nobody else is here. It's laggy. If I could reduce it, but I'd have to stop the stream. Maybe it's just the resolution I'm streaming at. I'm streaming my whole monitor. Okay, anyway, back to it. I hope I'm not ruining this lesson. So now we want to start making sure that we do checks before we start interacting with anything. So anytime we call get NPCs or get objects, get anything, we want to assign this variable. We want to know if it exists. When we get the closest, we want to make sure it's not returning null. So what we do is we do an if statement, and anything inside the if statement here, anything inside the parentheses is a condition check. So if it's true, it'll run in the code inside the brackets here. So if it's true, it'll run the code here. And just in case, you didn't really, I don't know if I typed that right. So first we want to make sure NPC does not equal null. And what's that saying is we want to make sure it exists. If it's null, it doesn't exist. A goblin isn't there when we call the method. So we want to make sure you type NPC, which is the variable name. NPC does not equal, which is the not operator, which is the exclamation point, and then equals. If we want to make sure if it did not exist, or if it doesn't exist, we use the equal operator, which is the double equals. But we want to make sure it's not null, so we can interact with it. If it was null and we tried interacting with it, it would crash our client. It would say in the logger, NPC or null pointer exception, I meant. Okay, so now we want to make sure it's, we can find a goblin in the game. So what we want to do is we want to use the log method, which is where we can't even speak. We toggle the logger here in the client, and we use the log method or log function. And what we type here in the string will output here when it's called in if a goblin exists. So we want to type goblin exists, and then we want to go to build artifacts, rebuild. Okay, and then we want to go back to the client. And now you're going to see it spam a lot because we're refreshing it every 600 milliseconds. So when we go to the start button, refresh, and now we have lesson 1 under local. Let me check my Skype. Okay. Let's see. Okay, lesson 1, click start, and now we see that a goblin does exist. Now let's see. Let's try moving far away. Since we're near a bunch of goblins, it'll always show it exists because we can find one. Let's see if we can go farther away from the map. We have one here, so it's saying it exists. Oh, look, now it stopped. So that means there's no goblin nearby. I believe it's like to the edges of the minimap, I believe, where it'll stop searching. I think it's like 40 tiles, 50 tiles. Okay, once we run into the zone here, we can find that goblin there. So we'll just run back here. So now that we know how to know if it exists, we could start interacting with it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the script. And anything you do, you want to always make sure you null check because it will crash. It will crash your client. So I'll demonstrate it now. Let's say npc.interact. All right, npc.isVisible. We'll do that first. That meaning if it's in the game client, it's visible in the game client here on the screen. So it is visible, but we didn't null check. I mean, sometimes this will work, but other times it will crash for clients. So I'm going to demonstrate that now, what it looks like. And I'm going to do task manager as well. So I'm going to go to toggle logger, hit start. Lesson 1, we rebuilt it with the .npc is visible method. We did not null check. Just remember that. It's like lesson 1. Oh, wow. Okay. It does work. Okay. Interesting. Oh, okay. Hold on. I'm going to test its limits right now. Interesting. That is odd. Okay. I'm trying to make it crash, not make it work. So let's try again. We'll do the interact method. I'm pretty sure it'll crash with that interact method. I have no idea why this isn't crashing. Anyway, you always want to make sure you null check because, I mean, it'll work, but You want to be sure. Okay, alright, we'll just forget about that. Okay, so we're gonna redo this here. NPC does not equal null. And there's different ways you could do this. You could set this up. This is the most basic way, where we just call the goblin name and we'll get the closest goblin. We'll check if it exists. It exists. And then now we can access other methods, and you always want to make sure that you condition check everything you call. So, I mean, you could do NPC dot is visible here, but what if it fails? You know, if returns false, and you have some other code underneath that needs to run if it's visible. So we always want to make sure we do if NPC dot is visible. We run the code inside the brackets there. If it wasn't, it would skip to the end of the loop and restart again. It would check it not does not equal null is visible. So we'll do this here. If it's visible, we want to execute code inside here, code here, and then say it's not visible on our screen. What we want to do is call the camera API, which will do get camera. Or wait, we do if else. We'll use an if else statement. Sorry. Get camera dot move to entity. I mean. So we'll call the get camera API, and then we look for to entity. Entity being NPC, object, etc. And then we want to pass the entity variable we made here, NPC, NPC, or NPC in caps, and then NPC is what our uh, variable name is, so we'll do NPC. And here, if you try to type it in all caps and you try to do this, it would give you an error. So you just want to make sure you're doing it right. Yeah, expression expected. So you want to call NPC the name. And now, since this is a oh, it's a boolean. So it's only called once, so we can just call the camera there. So now it'll move the camera and and it'll loop again and check if it's visible. If it's not, it'll move it again. And we'll demonstrate that here. I'll go ahead and rebuild. Get the logger. Oh wait, hold on. We'll put a log here. Moving camera. Another output. It's visible. Hit refresh. Rebuild. Okay. So once you got that here, what this explain if it exists. So if it exists, if it's visible, and then the else means if the first condition wasn't true, then we'll execute code inside here. So we'll go else, we'll run the code here. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, else we will run the code here. And it'll just do this block here. So if it exists, if it's visible, if it's not visible, we'll go down here and we'll move the camera. It'll call the log method here, it'll type in the output, moving camera, and then we'll call the camera API, get camera to entity NPC. And we'll move it to that to that NPC's location. So let's go ahead and turn the camera. We'll do it over here. Okay, now the goblins are off screen. So now we're facing away. And let's see. I'll get rid of the mouse because you can see my mouse in the stream. And we'll get the camera. So anytime you want to see the camera pitch and yaw, you want to go here under OSBOT options. You'll go to settings, options. And you can look at all the debug information, entity hover. You hover over an entity, it'll give you a bunch of options of what it has. You know, players, whatever. What we're looking for is the camera. We know we're at 37 and 195. So this is where you can see if the camera moves. anything you want to debug it in case like OSBOT updates and the camera API isn't working, which is a major issue because everything uses the camera API. Most of all interact methods use the camera API. So we want to do refresh since I rebuilt the jar. Click lesson1 or whatever you named it to. Click start. And you see here it exists and we move the camera. We moved it here. We want to pause it. So it first checks if it exists. So it starts at the beginning of the loop, checks this. If it's true, it'll go inside, check that. If it's true, go inside, else it would move the camera. Go to the end of the loop, loop again, check again. Keep doing that until the script stops. Or if the script's paused, you can see it's not printing any more output information that we called from the log functions. So first we started, it exists, and then this returned false because it wasn't visible on the screen when we first started the script. So then it goes down here and it says, oh, we're going to print log moving camera, and now we're going to move the camera to the entity or the NPC. So then it says here moving camera, and then after we move the camera and it loops again, it'll start saying it exists, and it'll check here NPC is visible, which is true now because it was on the screen when we first ran the script. It's visible and it exists. So now we can start with interacting. So we'll go here, press pause, moving camera. Anytime they go off screen, it'll move the camera. So now it's visible, it exists. So now we want to stop the script. I wish you could clear this output. Anyway, so now we want to remove this. Now that we know it's visible, we want to interact. So what we want to do is create another if statement. We're going to call NPC again, and we want to find the method. We want to find the interact method, which is here. Now there's a bunch of options you can do. Usually you want to do one option, which is the attack option listed here inside the game. When you right click a goblin, you attack, or if when you left click, you see in the tooltip on the top left above the camera debug, the tooltip has the default action attack. So anytime you call the interact method, if the tooltip interact or the first option is available in the tooltip, it'll just left click. So say you were interacting with an item and only you could use, or you can only do use here, and it was the first option, but you wanted to wield, it would right click and then select wield if it was the second option. If it was the first option, it's like say we called interact with the inventory and we hit wield, it would just left click it. So I just wanted to tell you that just in case. So now we want to do npc.interact, and then we want to type out and make sure it's case sensitive because you don't want to just do attack lowercase. It'll just sit there and not doing anything. So make it so it's attack, spell it correctly. And now, if interact returns true, that means it clicked on the NPC. So we interacted with the NPC. And then here you can add a bunch of extra methods. We'll do the plus sign. So first we can, because it takes a bunch of arguments, I believe. So we could do a string plus another string, just to add it all into one string. So when it outputs, it'll add it all together. So we want to do NPC, and then we want to get the name so we know what we're attacking. And that calls, it gets the name of the NPC. Okay, so it should output, we interacted with the NPC, exclamation point, space, and then it should be goblin, because we're looking for a goblin. I mean, you don't have to use the getName method, you could just say goblin, because we already know we're attacking a goblin. Okay, next, we want to go to the API. So when you want to go here, oh, yeah, sorry about the laggy stream, guys. Hopefully the recording is better. Which I guess so I can start recording, it'll be a lot easier, and then I can edit and, get rid of stuff. Okay, Okay, now we want to do conditional sleep. We want to look for the conditional sleep class or library. And we want to go here, conditional sleep. Loading. Want to get rid of this, and I'll get rid of this. I'll go ahead and add him here. Okay, so now we're in the conditional sleep class. So anytime we want to use a conditional sleep, we use it after we do a check. So it'll sleep until the condition is true, which is cased out here. Creates a conditional sleep instance that will sleep until its condition is true or if the timeout has expired. Now, if we use a default conditional sleep, anything that we check inside the condition is looped or it's checked every 25 milliseconds. Now, depending on what methods you use inside your conditional sleep, it could be very taxing on your CPU. So what we want to use is we want to create our own sleep time in between every check. So we'll be using the public conditional sleep, the timeout, and then the sleep time where it creates a conditional sleep instance that will sleep until the condition is true or the timeout is expired, and then the sleep time in milliseconds between timeout and condition checks. So it'll save us time instead of checking every 25 ms if the condition is true. I mean, half the cases you're like 15 tiles away, and then you want to click. I mean, if you want speed, you can just use the default conditional sleep. But it could, increase your CPU. Like right now, I mean, I'm at 9%, but yeah, whatever you want to do. So we have the conditional sleep here, so anything you want to check here is available in the API. So after we interact, we want to sleep until we're in combat. So what we can do is we call the conditional sleep class. We'll do a new, type in new, conditional sleep. Hit enter. Make sure you're getting it from the right class, utility class, or library, wherever, package. Hit enter. And what I like to do first is use the shortcut, Alt Enter, Alt plus Enter. Implement methods. I'll hit OK or hit enter again. And at the very end, when you hit a dot sleep, if you did not have this, if you did not call the sleep function, it would just loop again and interact again. It wouldn't, it wouldn't call the sleep. So we want to add that to the end. Then now here, this is where we put our parameters, which was listed here. We could do the default where we only use the timeout, but what we want to do is the timeout and sleep time, just to keep the checks in order. So we could do 2000. So that means after we click the NPC, we'll wait 2 seconds or 2 seconds of timeout and sleep until then. So what we're going to do, so this is default, and we want to check at least twice every timeout. I don't know. Yeah, it'll be 2 loops. It'll be 2 condition checks between this because we'll do 1 second, check again, another second, check again. But it should, I mean, by 1 second, we'll do 3. By at least 2 seconds, we'll know we've attacked something. So now we want to make sure we call the combat class, which is listed here in the API. Combat, where are you at? Combat. And we want to check if we're already fighting. And let's see. Where is it? Or is fighting. Checks if your player is in combat with a character. So that's what we can use. We can call getCombat.isFighting. And now return true, which is what we need. We need a Boolean statement here inside the condition check. So we want it to return true to break the conditional sleep and then keep looping to whatever we're going to do next. So let's see. We'll do return and we'll call the getCombat API. GetCombat dot, and then we'll look for is fighting. Sometimes it'll be at the beginning. If select it, is fighting. So now it'll keep looping every second until this returns true, until we're attacking a goblin or we're interacting with a goblin. And it'll stop checking after 3 seconds. That's the timeout. That's when it'll stop sleeping. So if we run this now, what we now know is if it exists, if it's visible, we can interact with it. So interact, attack option. And then we'll sleep. We'll do sleep for 3 seconds, or yeah, 3000 ms or 3 seconds until the condition is true. So if the condition is still false, it'll keep looping until 3 seconds have passed or the timeout expired. It's like it says in the API docs here, or you can check it there. I know some of you have it open. Link Discord. Let's see, announcements. Okay, back to what I was talking about. Okay, so what we now know if we null check to check if it exists, the goblin exists. If it's visible, we'll interact. If it's not visible, it'll turn the camera. And then loop again, and it'll follow the sequence here and check the if statements. If this returns false, it'll do the same thing. Instead of having an else, it'll just skip to the end of the loop. It'll ignore everything else. Okay, so if we run this now, we go to build artifacts, rebuild, and I want to click start, toggle, or see, oh, it's toggle. Okay, so now we're just logging in. So now it checks if it exists, or if it's visible. It wasn't visible, so it moved the camera, and then it interacted. Okay. And yeah, see, that's the problem with just having a basic filter, or just a basic closest goblin. It'll interact even if it's in the dying animation. And you notice there, I don't know if you can see it in my stream, that it interacted with the same goblin twice. That's because we didn't have a check for if our player was already in combat. We checked in the conditional sleep, but that's after we interact. Once the sleep is over, it'll loop again and check if it's null, it's visible, and we interact again. What we can do is check if what I did just now, if I do Control Z, so I highlighted everything and I did a cut because we're going to cut it for now. We'll do an if statement and we'll use the not operator because if I did if get combat that is fighting, it'll return true if we're fighting. And what we want to do is check if we're not fighting, so we'll use the not operator. And then we want to paste everything we have in here. So this checks if we are in combat. And then if we're not in, or checks if we are not in combat. Sorry about that. And then we'll do all the checks necessary here. And then we'll check here, else if it is in combat, we can log in combat. Hit rebuild. Refresh. Lesson1. So it sees here, it interacts. Now it says we're in combat. So we wait until the goblin dies. And that's the issues with I know how we can fix that. So there's other methods we can check. We can also check if it exists, and this is the and operator, which is 2 ampersands. The or operator would be to I forgot what that's called. Anyway, that's the OR operator. It's right above the enter key if you're on the US layout. I don't know if it's available on all keyboards. It should be. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, we'll use and we'll check if NPC get health percent is greater than 0. And now eliminate this clicking on the same dying NPC, which what we experienced earlier when we were checking the code. We hit rebuild, refresh, get the logger out so you can see what's happening. Start, we interact, we're in combat. It'll switch to the next one. It'll ignore the dying animation, or it'll still sleep since we're in our character's still facing. Skip it, you see how it doesn't click on it again until the NPC dies. Boom. Then it'll keep attacking the next available NPC, which is our goblin, that's above 0 health. We don't want to attack it when it's in its dying animation or 0 health. So here we go. We have a working fighter script. I mean, we could tune it up and fix it with other methods. We don't have to check if it's get combat is fighting because it checks if it's interacting. We're always interacting with it, even if it's after it's dying. So that's why it delays until after it's dead. But I mean, you could check the API for different methods you could use to check combat. We have the combat class, and then we have the NPC interaction class there, and you can check all the methods what the NPC has. You can check the character class. You can check if it's animating, you can check the health. You can check anything else, everything that's in the API. So we'll go here and we'll go to the character class, and character implements, and here it shows you here where character implements entity, and entity implements characters like or any character, RS2Object, ground and items, ground decorations, interactable objects, NPCs, players, well, everything. Mostly everything in the game that's interactable. It's basically a character. Okay, and I'm gonna go back here. We'll go ahead and add him. I think that's the guy from Offsite. I recognize his name. Okay. Okay, now that we're killing a bunch of NPCs, I'm going to show you different ways. I'm going to show you how to use the filter class, and then I'll show you how to do lambda expressions. That way we can defeat the purpose of typing all this out, checking if it's visible, if it's, the health percent is greater than 0, and other checks in case someone else is fighting our goblin, we don't want it to attack that goblin that's already interacting with somebody else. So we'll go ahead and stop this. And I'll go ahead and comment this out. And I guess I can put the code in at the end of the video when I'm done recording. So I'll go ahead and put everything here. And we'll put that to the end. So anything new I'll place at the top of the loop. So, okay, so we'll make another NPC variable, NPC, and we'll call it, we'll just call it NPC again. Just, you can name it anything. You can call it George, you can call it Goblin, since we're attacking goblins. Okay, and then we do the same thing. We get NPCs.closest. Then here we notice we have a bunch of parameters we can use. We can do different closest methods. We can filter by area if it's an area, and then we do the string of the names of the NPCs we want. We can check real distance, which means it'll use CPU power to check actual distance. I think that's a heavy method to use, and then you can use the filter. But what we're going to do now, we're just going to use the filter class, and this is the basic filter class that we have in the OSBOT API, and this is without without the need for lambda expressions. This is the very basic. I recommend it for anybody here. So before I start with that, like if you're very new to OSBOT scripting, I recommend the filter class. And then if you read up on Lambda expressions, which I'll show after I show the filter class, you'll understand it better, but I believe you'll understand the filter class. So we'll go to filter API. Actually, it's filter. I think it's filter. Hold on. Yeah, it's here. So we use the filter class in NPC filter. That's the method, the closest. It shows you all the entity API interact or closest methods here. You can do closest with just a bunch of strings of names like goblin, cat, etc. Or you can put the NPC ID. I don't really recommend it unless you absolutely need it, because IDs can change every game update for NPCs. Not every, or it will crash at some point and you'll have to update it again. You have to go back to your spot, check the NPC ID with the entity hover debug tool under the client settings, like here, options, entity hover. And notice how we hover over a goblin. We could see goblin, the name of the entity, ID 3036. And we notice that different goblins have different IDs, 3029, 3030. It's just better to follow by name instead of inputting all the IDs there. Instead of typing 3029, 3030, you can just type in the name. Now, the only reason you'd use IDs if you only want to attack two specific monsters in a general area. Say if I wanted to attack these two goblins in this area over here, I'd get their IDs and do it like that. Okay, anyway, we'll go back to the NPC filter. I'll have to look for it here. I think it's the NPC comparator now. I can't find it. Hmm. I think it's just the general filter class here. It'll match. Yeah, I believe it's just this. I'll show you how to use it. I couldn't find it in the docs, so we type in just the same way with a conditional sweep. We'll type in new filter, make sure it's capital F, and then we'll see a bunch of options here. We can do contains name filter, model filter, name filter. What we want to do is we want to filter one NPC and make sure it ends with a semicolon after we assign it. And now what we notice here is it uses the match boolean here, what is showed in the filter class in the documents. It defines whether two objects match the desired filter condition. Object being the object to match, true if two objects match the same specific filter. So I guess it'll filter the NPCs in game and check if it matches our condition statement. So we want to make sure that, and we're inside the match method here. So we want to follow the NPC parameter name, NPC, and you can change this to anything you want. You can call it goblin, what we can do now, but it's really, no, actually it's in the scope of the method, so we don't have to worry about it and calling that. So actually it'll get confusing, so I'll just rename it to NPC like we had it before. So now we can call a bunch of methods like we did earlier. We check if it exists. NPC does not equal null. Null meaning that it doesn't exist or it's empty or it's like nothing's there. So we want to make sure it does not equal null. And we want to use the AND operator to add more methods. Now when you use the AND operator, I don't know if you've read up on any Java tutorials. AND operator, if it's just two conditions or two statements like not null and say npc.isVisible, both of these have to be true in order for the whole thing to be true. That's what it means to use the AND operator. So if I have multiple AND operators here with condition checks, all of them have to be true in order to get a match for our goblin, and then we check if it exists here. If nothing exists, it'll return null. But if we use the OR operator, only one has to be true in order to, in order to be true. But for now, we're going to be using the AND operator since I'm losing track of time here. So we shouldn't check if it's visible. We'll do that later. We can call the exists method NPC exists. Yeah, we'll keep that. And we want to make sure we can reach the goblin. We don't want it attacking a goblin that's on a different part of the island, you know. Not necessarily in our case, you know, say we had a goblin on the other side of the fence. If we didn't have them get map check, it would try to interact with something outside where we can't reach. You see, we can't click anything, can't interact with anything. Same with the cow. It'll just sit here and I can't reach that, and it'll just sit here at the gate. So we're gonna call the map API get map, and we want to get the can reach function, and we notice how it takes an entity parameter, which is our NPC variable in this case, and that checks if we can reach the NPC here. So we go to map can reach, and we could do the can reach method for positions and all this other stuff, but for now we're using it for entity. And the entity to reach, that's the entity here, which is our case an NPC, which is the goblin, and true if the can be reached from our current position. So from here we can reach this goblin, from here we can reach that any goblin in this general area. If I named it, if I was searching for a cow, I wouldn't be able to reach it unless the cow entrance was already open. In this case, it's closed. Okay, and one other thing I forgot to check is we don't have a name for our NPC, so this would be just a general filter for anything that is attackable, it'd attack it, or it'd interact with it. So here we want to make sure the NPC get name. We want to use the equals method. And we want to pass a string. And the name we're going to be attacking is goblin, so we'll place goblin there. So now we check if it exists. We get the name. We want to make sure the name equals goblin, so it'll filter all the NPCs near us. Check if the name, if it exists, has the name goblin. Or actually, if it doesn't equal null, it's name. And I wonder what this method does. I don't really use it. I gotta check the API. Character exists. Where does exists? It checks if it still exists or not. Say, I guess we can keep that there. All right. My mic volume. That should be better. Go ahead and add them. Okay, back to what we were doing. Okay, so we check if it doesn't equal null. We check the name equals goblin. Check if it exists. If it still exists in the game, we check if we can reach it. And then now we want to check if the health is above 0, because we don't want to attack dying NPCs or dying goblins, etc. So we'll go to get health. What we use down here, the same method, you can copy and paste. Get health %. And we notice that the method returns an int. So to make it a Boolean statement, we want to make sure it's greater than 0. That means if this returns true, or if it's greater than 0, it will return true. If not, it will return false. Now, if it was just empty there, it would give you an error and say that the AND operator can't be applied to the Boolean statements here and an int here. So greater than 0. If you want to be, depending on what NPC you have, you can say greater than 50% of the health. Say if you're killing dragons or NPCs that, if you kill it above 50% health, it's your loot. But in this case, we're just killing goblins, we're not looting. And then a final check here. You can hit an enter here because Java ignores white space. So we're going to do a final check if the NPC is not interacting with any other character. So the NPC is interacting, or NPC get interacting equals null, meaning where nothing is attacking it. Meaning here nothing's interacting with it. If I click on it now, that means my character is interacting with it, and that means it does not equal null. So in this case, if we were in a full world, and we can go to free to play, and go to world 1. Yeah, you notice there's a bunch of people here. So if I didn't have the get interacting method, it'd probably attack this NPC, next, etc. It'd be going for the ones in combat. It'd look for ones that are idle and just walking around. So now we have our filter here. All we can do now is do an if statement, and we check again if it's not null, because it can still return null matches. So we just to be safe, you want to always null check, even if you already have it here. Okay. And I don't know. I mean, let's see. I know I showed you how we could check if it's visible, and then we can move the camera. But if you want it on default, what the interact method does, it calls interaction event. This here, and let's see, interaction event. By default, the interact method will call this API interaction event, and it will call the default entity and then the actions that you place in there. And by default, it'll move the camera and it'll walk to the NPC. So we don't have to worry about moving the camera or walking to the NPC. But for just, basics, I showed you how to check if it's visible and move to it. If you wanted to check distance, you could check npc.distance, pass in your position, and check if it's less than 7 tiles, which would be this. I'll show you an example. If npc.distance, or goblin actually, distance, or actually you do get position distance of my position, meaning your character. When you see my position or my player, it's referencing your player in the game. You here, the one that you're playing inside the bot client. And we want to check if it's less than 7 tiles. If it's less than 7 tiles, we interact. That's the general case. If it's not, we do else stuff here. Or other than that, you would do else. If this isn't true, if it's not less than 7 tiles, you would call the get walking or the walking API, get walking.walk, and pass in goblin.getPosition, which is this here. You notice you can walk to areas, entities, and positions. What we want is an entity, and we'll do goblin. You can do get position, and it'll still be fine. So that's just Defaults, I know interact by itself. Walks to the NPC if it's far away. If these were all being attacked by players and there was one all the way at the very edge in the corner, it'd walk all the way there. It would turn on run by default. I believe the default is 15 energy, and it'll turn on run and walk to it. So most of the methods in the API already call upon other methods. You don't really have to implement them yourself. So what we want to do is we want to attack, and we'll do the same thing. We want to cut this, and we want to check if we're not in combat. So we call the combat API is fighting. Place that in there. So if we're not fighting, we want to attack the goblin, and we want to do the same thing. Add a conditional sleep. Implement methods, Alt plus Enter. Hit Enter again. Hit OK or press Enter. Make sure you add the sleep method here at the very end. And every time you highlight the curly braces inside IntelliJ, it'll show you the starting and ending. So make sure you want to click the starting of the conditional sleep, and at the very end you want to add the .sleep method. So it'll actually sleep. If you didn't have it there, like I mentioned earlier, it would just skip it. So here we want to add, say, what we did last time, 3,000 or 3,000 milliseconds or 3 seconds. And we want to condition check every second. So I believe it'll only check 3 times. And then it'll skip it if it was false, or it'll stop if it's true. So we want to make sure we're fighting. So it'll check if we're fighting. And if that returns true, it'll stop sleeping and loop, and it'll go check the loop again. We're already in combat, so we want to do else. So this means not in combat. If it exists, attack. If we manage to attack or interact with it, if it has to move the camera or walk to it, it'll return false, I believe. Yeah, I believe it'll return false. And loop again and try again. I'm not too sure about that. Sleep for 3 seconds or until the condition is true. Okay, and then this is where we know that we're fighting. So actually we can just skip that. We already know we're not in combat when we start the script. And we can go ahead and rebuild. Press start, refresh, hit lesson, and it'll search for an available NPC. We found one here. It'll search for an available NPC that matches our filter here. It's not being interacted with. It exists. It's not null. Name is Goblin. We can reach it, and the health is above 0. And generally, when you use filters, it's better than typing all the conditions here, if it exists, if the health is greater, if it's, stuff like this. And by default, the interact method moves the camera and walks the NPC. If you wanted to not walk and only move the camera, then you could use this example here. If it's visible, then we interact. If it's not, then we move the camera. Okay. So now it's just interacting fine. It'll kill the NPC. And I think I'm the only one watching it, so I should be good. Okay, so we're going to stop this here. And another thing I'm going to show you is the lambda expressions with Java 8. Now this will remove the need for creating a filter. By default, with lambda expressions, it'll know it's a filter, NPC filter. And you notice here, depending on how your IntelliJ is set up, it'll show that the filter can be replaced with lambda. Now, one way you could do it is hit here and hit Alt Enter and hit replace with lambda. And you'll remove it like that, and you'll see how it shows NPC. It'll create a variable. Lambda, it'll create a lambda expression NPC, and then we'll do the condition checks in here. And if you do Control Z, basically it's a nicer version of doing this. If you want to keep it nice and neat, you don't have to have this casting. You can just leave it like this. And it does the same thing. It's just, using lambda expressions, Java 8. You can search it on Google, Java tutorials, and it'll explain. Let's see. Where was I? I'll have to cut this out. Okay. Yeah, it's just another way. Just look it up online. I believe it'll teach you more than what I can. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know the API methods in and out and how to use them after practice, after maybe 2 years of practice, because I joined the forums in 2014 and I didn't start till the 2015. I didn't start scripting till then, and I had to learn all of this myself. So if you don't understand it now, there's other people with tutorials, and mine might not be as helpful, but some others are helpful. I'll try to lay it out as simple as possible, but if you don't know Java, then some of this will be confusing. If you don't know how to use if statements, if else, else if else if else, etc. So here this is how we interact with NPCs. We can use just the basic NPC get closest, and we call the name of the goblin. But then we'd have to do individual checks if it's not being interacted with, or if the health is greater than 0, etc. Or this is why we have the use of the NPC class, or the NPC filter, or filter class. We can use this, or we can use the lambda expression using the filter class. Or we can do and replace it with a lambda expression. Just whatever looks nicer to you. If you want to filter multiple NPCs, or just one NPC with multiple checks, so you don't have to do it here, so where it looks nice, we turn this code into less lines. We only interact when we're not fighting. Goblin 2, we'll just do that. Okay, so now we know how to interact with NPCs. We know how to use the filters. I hope you know how to use the filters here. Call a new filter. This is the most basic. You call the new filter class NPC. Make sure you select NPC. And anything that matches here, it will return that goblin here, and we'll check if it exists here. And if it does exist, we'll interact. Now I'm going to show you objects, which are trees, the gate at the cow pen, anything like that. They have the same menu types. They have walk here, examine, and the interact option. This is the name of the object. Notice how it's different than what we're interacting with here. We know the name of the NPC, and it has the attack option. For objects, they're named tree or gate. See here, gate, etc. Doors, stuff like that. So now we'll just go back to IntelliJ. I'll go ahead and comment this out. The code will be available in the description of the video when I, finish recording. It's going to be a big file, so I'm going to have to render it out and fix everything. Okay, so now we're going to do objects. Instead of NPCs like we did earlier, we're going to call RS in caps 2 object. And what we have here is all the object classes, or just the general game objects only. We're not calling the NPCs, we're not, calling other entity types. So we're going to go down to RS objects. If it's here, and we have the same types, we know it extends entity and we have interactable objects. And we have all the methods that we can check on it, like the same with the NPC, exists, get actions, get area, get grid, get the X and Y, get the name, get position, and then we can use interact. And then here, like I noticed, or how I told you earlier, it executes an interaction event that will attempt to interact with the interactable. It'll just set a default interaction event with camera use and uh, the walking API or walking event. So we want to give it a name. We'll just call it object for now, or actually we'll do door. We'll set that equal to get objects. And notice how for NPCs we did get NPCs. And here, this is where the return type what we get. We're not listing NPC object here, so we try to use that, it would give an error because it'd want to change the variable named door to NPCs. So we want to do get objects, and it returns objects, which is correct here on RS2Object. Get objects dot closest. In the same way here, it'll return an RS2Object. We can do the same here. The sample here, like we did with the goblin, we could just get any door closest to us and interact with it. Or we can do an RS2Object door 2, which is in the second. Get objects dot closest, and we could do a RS2Object filter, end it with a semicolon, and we want to match if the RS2Object does not equal null. Remember, we're following the parameters of the match function here inside, what it's going to return when it's checked. And here we want to check the actions. When we interact with it, we can just interact with it anyway. Say we just want to close it. And if it exists with an action there, it would probably just interact with it. Anytime it's closed, it would hit open. But here we can check if it has an action. We can filter it, like say if it has an action close. I think it's close or closed. Or has the action open. So when it's closed, it has the action open. If it's open, it'll have the action close. So we want to check if it has the action open. So here, check if it exists. It's open and we can reach it. And we want to make sure we give it the name door, or else it'll just check any object around us. So get name equals door. That's the name of the object in blue. Notice how entities are, NPCs are yellow, I believe it's gold or orange, and objects are blue. Ground items are a type of brown or tan. So that's how you can distinguish between each entity. Object, NPC, anything on the ground would be ground items, like if you drop an item. That's now a ground item. You can interact, take. Okay, and then now we can check if the door, I'm going to use the filter because I don't want to just check if a door is closest to us. I want to check if a door exists near us, has a name door, or an object exists near us, has a name door, has the action to open, to door, and we can reach that object. So that's when, if that filter returns true, it'll return that object that matched our specific needs in our filter. Check if door does not equal null, if door dot interact open. So we check if it has the action open. That means we want to interact open. We can now conditional sleep. Implement methods. Make sure you add the sleep method at the end. We want to return, and we could say if the door has the action close. So once we open it, now the door will have an action of close, and that will sleep after we interact with it, because we're still choosing the same door that we interacted with until we loop again. So here we want to rebuild. So mainly all entity types can use the same methods: interact, is visible, get named. So I mean, they're not that different. It's just they're different entity types you want to interact with. I know fishing spots are not considered objects; they're considered NPCs. Trees are objects. The walls, stuff on the ground like bones, coins, drops in the wilderness are ground items, which I'll show you how to do next. And I believe I'll end the video there. And then the next, I believe I'll do widget interaction or configs. But this is the general filter for the door, and we want to run this. Oh, and one more thing. If we wanted to just keep it as a lambda expression, you could do door3 equals get objects dot closest. We could name it anything. We can call it objects. We can call it dude. We just have to follow the name format for everything here. What we want to do is call it RS2Object, which we'll just copy all of this here. So with Java 8, we can turn this all into one line. To clear it looks nicer, and if you understand lambda expression, you could use them like this. I know other methods use lambda expressions for whatever they need it for. Like if you have a custom sleep class, which I have labeled under our util area, I have a custom sleep class here, which you'll use a lambda expression using Boolean supplier, where you would do sleep, or actually like this, new sleep, so sleep until. We'd call the lambda expression like this, true. True, it could be if whatever, we're just checking condition, I would just label it true. We have the timeout and the time, loop time. And that's pretty much it. And this is what we call a lambda expression. Or we could type in, or we can use the OSBOT new condition. I believe it's the OSBOT's API. I believe it's just Java API or whatever. New condition, and then add your condition there. I think you may be right. We'll see. Let's see what it has now. Let's see. We'll log door action. And we'll do the same at the end after we interact with it. It might be true what you said in the chat. It won't update. It might have the action forever, but we'll check here. We'll rebuild. check the logger, and we're going to interact with the door. Lesson1 start, invisible. You'll walk to it by default with the default interaction event. There you go. Open it, and that's pretty much it. Now it will go open all the doors that's available near us that have the action open. Wow, you can't really. Yeah, okay. It waited how many seconds? Actually, no. So it does update to check if it has an action close. So we should be good. So let's test it here. Okay, so I'm going to close all the doors here. I believe it'll only select this one because this one has this door has a different name, which is large door. If I wanted to include it, I could do it here in our filter. I can group it together with parentheses, and I could say or object get name equals large door. And rebuild that. So now it should open. I believe they have the same options. They should have the same options. Close and open. Okay. So now I'm going to test this, see if it updates. It should give the action open and it shouldn't sleep that long. So we check if it's open and now it's false about 2 seconds later. And yeah, which would be, so it might not be updating with the conditional sleep. Who knows? I could probably conditional sleep with a different check. I can see it skipped the large door. So I guess the other doors here are priority. Unless I put large door first. Oh, there's a large door. Ah, okay. So yep, that's how you interact with objects. Now, say we don't want to interact with doors. We want to interact with trees and we want to do wood cutting. So what we can do here, let's see. Find an oak tree, or actually here's a willow tree. And what we can do now, I'll switch to members world so I can. What we can do now is ignore this. We know how to do doors. Actually, keep that there. Yeah, I'll just create new variables there. And I'll just use the lambda expression for now. If you want to follow when I'm cutting a tree, you could use the regular class, a filter class, and just do the same matching like I would if a lambda expression. So I want to do RS2Object tree equals get objects dot closest object does not equal null. An object has or object dot get name dot equals willow for a willow tree and get map dot can reach the object. Now let's see, I believe we can use if our player is not animating, so my player dot is animating, meaning that we're not animating, which is the default animation of -1 when we do my player debug. We're not animating, so our animation ID is -1. If we click the tree, we see that we now have an animation of 867, so now we are animating. So here we can do if tree does not equal null, if tree dot interact, and we want to check the interact options, which is chop down. Make sure it's case sensitive, so make sure you get the casing down. Capital C chop, and then lowercase down. Same thing, we want to call a conditional sleep after we've checked everything. After every action, which is necessary if you want to put your script on the SDN. You don't want to use static sleeps like this, because in cases where you have latency where you're lagging, it could skip it, or it could misclick, or it could not misclick, or double click, etc. Because you're not. It's just better to use conditional sleeps in this case, for any case here, for any interaction, anything you do. So I'll just do 3000 since we're close to our object. And sleep, we'll do 1000, so we'll check 3 times. And we want to make sure we want to return if our player, my player dot is animating. So once we start chopping and our animation ID changes, it'll stop sleeping. So here, if we aren't animating, chop the tree if the tree exists. Sleep until we animate. Else we are animating, and print to the logger. Just to understand that we are animating. This is how you can debug certain methods. Just place a bunch of logs everywhere and see where it lands. So I'm going to leave the my player debug so you can check the animations. Right now we're not animating, we're just standing. So what we want to do is refresh. Make sure our logger is open. I'm not sure why I closed it. Lesson1, click start. Oh, hold on. Forgot to rebuild. There we go. Lesson1. We select the willow. Now we wait. It'll go to the next one that's available. Now we're animating, so now we're stuck in the loop of chopping the tree. And one thing you'll notice when the willow is gone, you'll have a different object name. I believe it's a tree stump or something like that of the sorts. I believe it doesn't have a name. It'll just not exist in that specific spot. So now you see we're idle and we're woodcutting. So this is how you would make a woodcutting script. It's pretty much that simple. You want to make sure if you're not animating, you want to check if the tree exists. Interact with it. After you've clicked it, you want to make sure you conditional sleep and check if you are animating. And other ways we can do this, I just want to, not other ways we can do this exactly, but other ways we can make this script more functional. You see here, tree stump, yes, so I was correct. So it would not interact with this because it does not, the name does not equal willow. But we did chop this one, and I'll just wait till our inventory is full. Okay. I'm just gonna check everything here. I left the Discord. Okay. I'll do that in a second. So now we notice that our inventory is about to be full after we chop this next log. And you notice how our inventory is full, but it's still clicking. It'll sleep after we interact with it. We forgot to add an inventory check to check if our inventory is full. And how we can do that is where we stop the script. We can now do a check. We can cut this and place it inside a, we can check if the inventory, we call the inventory API with get inventory. And we have a bunch of methods here that we can use. What we're going to search for is to check if the inventory is full. And you notice that how we have is empty and is full. What we're looking for is full. And if it's full, we do stuff to get rid of it. So, and then if it's not full, which is the if else statement, if that's true, else we'll do this. We want to chop more trees. So what we can do here is the same layout. If the inventory is not full and we're not animating, we'll do this. If we are animating, it'll just go here. But if our inventory is full, which in our case it is, we have a bunch of logs and I have my items here listed or in the inventory. What we can do now is call the API method inside the inventory class, which is the drop method. So we would do get inventory drop all. Now you see if we call this method, it'll drop everything in my inventory. I don't want that. I want to keep my defender and all my rune items here. I just want to drop willow logs. So what we can do here is we have a bunch of options. And we want to drop all of them. If we just select drop, it'll drop one every loop. What we want to do is loop through all the items and drop them all in a quick fashion. So what we want to do is select drop all willow log. Willow logs. Make sure you get the inventory item name right. I did not get it right. So I'm missing an S. And we can place a logger here, dropping the inventory because it is full. And I believe this is a Boolean method, so we want to make sure we check if we did drop it. But I don't think we need to check that here because then we could just loop again. I believe it calls its own conditional sleep inside that method. I'll have to check here. No, it just has regular sleep. Okay. Okay, so now that we rebuild, we want to check if our code works. We have the logger open. Click play, click lesson 1, click start. Now you see that it's dropping my inventory. And I have shift click enabled, so by default the OSBOT drop API can use shift dropping if you have it already selected in your RS settings. So you go to controls, and if you have it selected, it'll use the shift drop. If not, it'll just use the basic right click and drop, right click drop, which I'll show you here once it's done uh, cutting all the logs. So I'll go ahead and let that run. So now we have an endless power chopper running. We check if the inventory is full. If it's not full, it'll go to the else statement. Check if it's not animating. If it's not animating, it'll cut the tree. sleep until we're interacting. And then if it's animating, it'll go to the else statement down here and it'll say we are animating and it'll just keep printing. If you didn't want it to keep spamming the logger, we would remove this. And now it won't say anything until this is true or this is true. It'll just keep looping every 600 milliseconds. So that's what we can do now. We can rebuild it so it's not spamming our logger with that information. See here? Now we're just waiting for a new message. So here, inventory is full, so now we're dropping it. Like I showed you, we have shift drop disabled, so now it's dropping with right clicks. And it'll go back to chopping. And that's how you pretty much make a woodcut script. Now, there's other ways you can set this up. You can set it by area, different trees. You can make a GUI and set the tree name that way. You can always learn about this in the tutorial section. But here I just want to start off with making basic interactions for this tutorial. Okay, and now we're going to move on to ground items. Since we already have ground items here, we're already dropping them. So I'm going to let that run in the background while we work on this. So here we made a woodcutting script out of the blue because it was that simple. So now you can say you made your first script, this section here. So all you would do is just compile this, compile into a jar, call it woodcutting script instead of lesson, and you have your own wood power chopper. Okay, now we want to move on to ground item. Now instead of calling RS2Object for objects or NPCs, we call it like it is in game, or like it is what we call it when I say ground item, which you go to ground item all together. And you notice how we have ground item, ground decoration, and ground items. What we want is ground item. We want one. And we can call it logs since we're going to pick up the logs that we drop. Okay, and we want to equal get, instead of get objects or get NPCs, we now want the ground item. So what do you think we do? We call get ground items, and we can use the closest method with a lambda expression, or you can use the filter class that we have available. You would just do new filter and replace it with ground item, or you can select it in the menu. It should come up like this. New filter, ground item. But I'm going to use a lambda expression. So I'm going to say GI, short for ground item, does not equal null. And the ground item dot get name that equals willow logs. And the get map dot can reach the ground item. That's pretty much all you need if you want to select one item off the ground. Now, if you wanted any item in the area around you, you would remove the name and it would just pick up anything nearby. You could pick up bones from over here in the goblin area. This here where someone's fishing, it'll walk over there, or it'll pick up the logs nearby that we've been chopping. But in this case, we want to do willow logs. So we go down here, we've already made our filter. We check if it isn't null, it exists. The name is willow logs. That's what it's called in game. And we can reach it. So what we do now is we do an if statement. We check if the logs does not equal null, if the filter isn't null, because sometimes it will return null if it doesn't find anything. But if it does, it'll return that ground item. And we want to check that ground item if it exists or if it isn't null. So if it exists, and now we want to interact with it. We do the same way we interact with the objects or NPCs. We call the interact method, which uses the standard interaction event. where you can walk to the item or you can move the camera to the item. If you wanted to set your own interaction event to not move the camera or not do that, I'll show you after I do the basics here. So logs dot interact, and ground items have an interact option of take, and it should only be take unless you want to do a ground item and you want to select light in case you've dropped one when you're making a fire making script. So in this case I want to do take because I want to pick up the willow logs. So make sure you do it case sensitive, take, and we want to do a conditional sleep, and there's multiple ways you can do this. But one I like to do is get the inventory or empty space count. So I'll do the count. I'll make a integer variable, last count, and we'll assign it before we interact or after we interact. Actually, we should do it before. No. Yeah, we should do it before in case we're on top of the item. Yes, so last count equals get inventory dot get empty slot count. And what this means is we're getting the empty slots available in our inventory. And that's what we want to check. And then in our conditional sleep, we can say, because after we've interacted in take, if we picked up the item, then the empty slot count is different than what we last checked. So what we can do in the condition here is we can do get inventory, get empty slot count is less than the last count. Meaning if the current empty slots are less than what we had before. So say here we have this many, this many slots, so we have 4 items and there's 28 slots. If we have 24 free slots, empty slots. If I pick up one item, we now have 23 and it updates again. 22 is, and so on. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop these real quick. Click this, and as long as the logs exist on the ground, we'll keep looting them, and it'll loop every 600 milliseconds. And here, this is to prevent spam clicking. We have a conditional sleep until our inventory contains the logs. So here I'm gonna actually I have to check, did I rebuild? Yeah, make sure you always rebuild just in case. Refresh. And now you see that we're clicking the items until there's no more logs on the ground. So now there's no items available. So what I can do now is drop them again, and this is how you would pick up ground items from the game. Now let's say you wanted to remove this and you're in the wilderness and making your own looter script. You can make it different ways. I really don't know how you would make it. I would just call the ground items and pick whatever's up. You can make a priority list and stream, do arrays stream, and have a list of drops, whatever. But if you just call this, it'll pick up any ground item that's available near you in the game. So if I have these logs dropped here, and you'll see that there's trout over there. So watch what the script does now. So it'll pick up the logs since it's closer to us. And then now you see that it goes all the way over there to go pick up trout. So while we wait, see how it interacts again. That's because we only have a 3-second timeout. If you wanted to increase it, you could. So now this is looting everywhere. So now it's just picking up everything we find in the game. Of course, if you wanted it faster, you would reduce it. You could use the default where it checks every 25 milliseconds. And I'll show you that now. Where we hit stop, we hit start, and you notice how it's quicker to loot. Alright, let's drop these items. I'll show you a good example. So I'll drop some items here. I'll drop them here. I'll drop some here. And I'll drop the remaining here. So you'll notice a speed improvement. I'm kind of lagging, so you can't really experience it here, but it should be faster than what it was earlier. Okay. And that's pretty much how you interact with ground items in the game. So what we covered today was NPCs with conditional sleeps. We've covered objects using the same conditional sleep class. And then we made our woodcutting script with just the basic API functions of objects, conditional sleeps, the character class checking animating. When I call the myPlayer function, it's calling our character. And you could always do checks on, say, if the cow is animating, meaning if it is animating, you can return that. And then we use the inventory API to check if our inventory was full, and if it was, we dropped it. So that should complete everything today, what I covered in the Discord lesson plan, which was the NPC and object interaction. I went ahead and included ground items, which in this case could be just objects, anything like that. The next plans I could do would be widgets and configs, or I could go ahead and go over the walking API and other methods. Anyways, you guys would have to vote on that. Okay, thank you for watching.